about a topic that is the topic for this year's Community Management Advancement Day. And the Community Management Advancement Day takes place on the 4th Monday of every single January. And this year it's January 25th. And it's a day to recognize the efforts of community professionals all over the world. I mean, why didn't we have a day before this was created for us, you know? I love it. So for some people, it's a day off. For me, it's not. Seppi, for you, is it a day off?
Nope. Yeah, work day.
For most of us, it's not a day off, but it's a day that we can sit back and be like, yes, I love what I do and it's making a difference. So this year is all about resilience, and we're so excited to be bringing someone very special to do a fireside chat today about that topic and how we can navigate 2021. Also happening this year on January 25th is the CMX Community Industry Awards. Oh my God. Which are the awards for 2021. They started last year and they're coming back again this year. There's so many different awards with different categories for individuals and communities. So if you would like to watch the awards, check out the events.cmxhub.com and you can sign up and see who's winning, and there'll be some other announcements as well. Seppi, tell us what we've got going on this evening.
Yeah, so tonight's agenda, we got a great program for you today. So first, we're going to start off with our member spotlight. We have Nicolette Roses Agoro, who will be speaking next. After that, we have our fireside chat with Brian Oblinger. And then we'll have a Q&A. And then Valentina will tell you what's next.
That's right. So we're going to get started with our member spotlight. We started this back in February of 2020, which seems like forever ago, when we did our first, it's actually March 2020, when we did our first online event. And this is to bring somebody up at every single event that's part of the community to share a little bit about their community. So our member spotlight tonight has dedicated her entire career to community management, having a great love for understanding people, what makes them tick, and learning how to build true, valuable connections. She currently heads up the community and brand team at Disciple, along with their dedicated community, The Collective. So please welcome, with virtual applause, to Nicolette Roses Agoro. So we're going to make you come on the screen. Wow, so many people here. Let's see. Here we go. All right. Nicolette's going to come up on the screen and share a little bit about Disciple and what the collective does. All right.
Hi,
there she is.
Hi. Thanks so much for the warm welcome. I'm so excited for the rest of the event tonight.
No, it's going to be a great event. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, no worries. So I figured I'd jump in and give a quick 2 minutes about Disciple first. And besides what you guys may have heard, we are not a religious platform. I know on Facebook we get a lot of like, hey, is that a cult? And I'm like, no, not a cult. Okay, stay back. We're just really bad at naming our company, clearly. But on the lighter side of things, we're basically just a community advocate platform. Like, we're all here to really celebrate the power of community in businesses. So we provide the software, the amazing platform, and you kind of come on board with your community members and do the rest of it. And so to tail off from that, we also have the collective, and this has been my absolute baby since I first joined. So we've launched nearly for an entire year now. It's just sort of like flown by, and we've had Valentina on the team for a couple of months as well, and it's just been like a total blessing. And for us, the collective really is just a place where we can bring together our members, our customers, prospects, and then just general community enthusiasts online as well, where we can kind of network and share tips and tricks. And we love to welcome individuals like Seppi as well to come and chat on the platform, where we call them sort of their genius minds to come and share about their own knowledge. So yeah, it's really just a place where they can come together and learn, and again, like sort of break down those barriers and those walls and not feel like they can't be open and be themselves. So yeah, it's really key for us. It's the sincerity, it's the authenticity, it's building those true relationships and connections. And yeah, I just can't wait to see where the rest of the platform goes. And for anyone who is interested in joining, it is open and it is free. So yeah, come and jump on board. I see Valentina's dropped the link. So yeah, check us out and join our community. Yeah, thanks guys.
Thank you so much. Yes, I've shared the link in the chat for anyone who wants to join. There's the web side of the community. There's also the app. It's available on the App Store and on the Play Store, Google Play Store. And that's where you'll find me most days with all of the Disciple hosts and community enthusiasts. And Seppi is actually going to be talking next week on the live stream. So make sure you join in to hear about that. She's going to be talking about monetizing your community. So very hot topic for a lot of people.
Yeah, come.
Do you want to go with our main event of the evening?
So now we've done the member spotlight. Let's jump into our fireside chat. So I'm going to introduce our next guest. Ever since Brian got online in the late 1990s, who out there also got online in the late 1990s, he has been fascinated with building communities and creating digital experiences. He was fortunate to turn his passion into a career, helping hundreds of companies connect with their customers to build an engine for engagement, satisfaction, and retention. From a content moderator to the vice president of customer experience and global community, he has amassed a vast library of knowledge, experience, and wisdom through the benefit of hindsight that he can share to accelerate your initiatives. So without further ado, let's give a round of applause, let me find my words, for Brian Oblinger.
Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Oh, you know what? Here. See, I failed right off the bat. There we go. We're back. Hello.
Hello, Brian. Welcome.
Hey.
Welcome.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. All right, well, let's just dive in. I'm going to tell everyone again, we have some questions that we're going to be asking Brian. If you have any questions, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end. So you can drop your questions in the Q&A box here at the top of the chat. You'll see Q&A. You can type your questions in there, and we'll take them at the end. But let's just dive in here. So Brian, 2020 threw us a curveball, right? Everybody curveball, and affected our personal and professional lives. Can you share with us some of the personal and professional challenges you faced due to the pandemic?
Yeah, well, I think it threw us more than one. And just because the clock and the calendar switched over to 2021, apparently we're not done yet. So, we're all kind of living through all this stuff, and the nightmares continue. So, I think it's important to point out that, these things will be ongoing, right? And it's really important to kind of plan for that. I know we're going to talk about that a little bit later on. As far as me personally, like everybody else, I watched in horror, right, as things were unfolding, especially here in the United States over the last year or so, and that takes its toll mentally, and I think that whether you intentionally do it or not, that tends to flood into your work as well, right? We're just people. You can't really separate out those two things. So that was kind of the general piece, and then I got laid off in 2020, right? So COVID, lose your job, all the good stuff. Did a whole bunch of interviewing, throughout the year with not a whole lot of luck, just because everybody was so distracted as they should have been, right, with COVID and the lockdowns and all of that. So go through the normal bouts of imposter syndrome and kind of highs and lows and all of those wonderful things. But at the end of the day, I was extremely lucky to, kind of be in the position where I was to weather that storm. And, not a lot of people or other people weren't, right? And so I think it's really important to acknowledge what those struggles are, but also understand the bigger perspective here of where you fit in, kind of on that curve.
Lovely, lovely. And I didn't even ask, where are you tuning in from?
I'm in Denver, Colorado.
Got it. Okay. Yes. And imposter syndrome, definitely. I'm glad that you touched on that, because that's something I think all of us, no matter where you are in your career journey, what level, what title you have, I think imposter syndrome is something that is becoming more normalized. I'm glad you mentioned it. Valentina's asking in the chat if anyone felt imposter syndrome during 2020. I certainly did. So thanks for bringing that up.
Yes, I just want to say before we move on, I love your mug, Brian. Can you just show your mug to everyone?
Let's see here. There we go. Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about your mug.
Well, we have a little podcast, Erica Cool and I, and nothing is complete without swag, of course, as we know here in the industry. So, we made mugs we send out to people and shirts and other stuff. So, not trying to sell you anything, but we got some cool swag over here.
Everyone loves swag. I mean, who doesn't love free things, right?
Yeah, I think Jake McKee, who I've been harassing in the chat, is our #1 client at this point. I think he bought all of the shirts and the mugs. So Jake can model for us someday all of our wonderful community themed shirts.
Oh yes, definitely. Okay.
Love it. Yeah, take it, Valentina.
Right, we're going to continue with the questions. So my next question for you is regarding some of the hardship you faced in your business. Can you tell us how you overcame the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I think there's the spectrum here of how you deal with things and how you go through it. I was in a little bit of an interesting, as I mentioned before, situation where sort of was without a job and then kind of considering my options of what to do. And I definitely went through the phases of, kind of grief and imposter syndrome and all of that. At some point, I sort of turned the corner, I guess, and decided to, I threw a little pity party for myself and had a good cry, and then sort of decided that I was going to, stop feeling sorry for myself and, kind of figure out what I wanted to do next, and ended up, starting my own consultancy, which, starting your own business in the middle of a global pandemic and a recession is usually not the best timing to roll something out and do that. But it, kind of turned out that everybody's thinking about community and all of those things as a relation to the lockdowns and how they're going to reach their customers. So it ended up being, okay timing. And I always tell people that it's both exciting and terrifying at the same time. Don't ever let anybody tell you like, oh yeah, it's easy, like no problem, it's all good. There's definitely the ups and downs there, and I want to be honest about that.
Yeah, definitely. And big question then is, how did you stay resilient through it all, with everything going on with yourself and then the wider world, and not knowing like what tomorrow's going to bring?
Yeah. Well, I think that there's shades of gray of resiliency, and what that means for everybody kind of means a different thing. And I've said before that it's really easy to kind of put up this front, right, when these things are happening to you, and put on this image on Twitter and LinkedIn or whatever, like, oh, I got this, no problem, I'm not affected by this. And then in the background, you're very affected by it, and you're, sort of living through that. I think what's actually more important, and I think this is becoming more embraced and less taboo, is to actually admit the fact that, you're being affected by these things, and that it's taking a toll, and that perhaps your mental health is in the greatest state, and those kinds of things. So I think it's really important for people to be really honest about that, because what we don't want to do is alienate people who maybe are feeling that way, but all they see online is, well, everybody else seems like they're doing fine, so it's just me, I'm the problem. And it's like, no, everybody's feeling that way, but a lot of people just don't necessarily want to admit it. So, for me personally, that was a big piece, is kind of coming to terms with it and admitting it and talking about it with people. Luckily I have a huge network of friends and family and people in the industry that I can reach out to and, talk about these things. And I hope that everybody else does. And if you don't, I'll be that, call me up, happy to talk about it. But I've always had this mentality that like the past is the past, and we can only really look forward. I can't affect or change what happened yesterday or last week or, 4 years ago or whatever the case is. And so I think one of the ways that I stay resilient is just keeping my eyes forward and thinking about what I can do next to make things better, or, whatever the case might be. And I personally, as you all know, hopefully I drive a lot of satisfaction, which kind of leads into my resiliency out of like doing stuff like this, giving back to the industry and trying to help as many people as I can. And I feel like if I've done that and I'm looking forward, then, you know, that's sort of, to me, what resilience means for me personally. It might mean something completely different for somebody else.
Yeah, no, I love that. And I feel like as community managers, like we're almost like, I wouldn't say born with it, but we've inherited this resilience that we don't really know that we have until we need it. And luckily, there are so many community managers around the world now. And like even just on LinkedIn and Twitter, like the camaraderie of us just getting together just really just brings everybody up. And that's what I've loved about seeing the community industry evolve over the last year in a way that we didn't think it would. And that's really helped kind of broaden my resilience without me really realizing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Second?
Yes. Yeah, I want to ask you, well, I'm going to ask a question about community and general resilience, but first I want to back up and just ask, going back to talking about your own resilience, you know, you said you got laid off, you're working in community, you got laid off. How did you get into consultancy? Like, where did you decide to pivot? Because that can be a scary leap to being an employee with that security to then doing your own thing. Can you just give us a little bit of insight into that?
Yeah, I mean, so for me, it was kind of like riding a bike a little bit, because I had been a consultant years ago. I kind of got my start in the industry doing a lot of things that could or could not be considered consultancy, but we did a lot of consultancy. And then I sort of broke out of that and, you know, went and built teams at companies to do community. So I've kind of taken the round trip here. And so for me, the work part of it, the actual act of consulting and working with companies and a bunch of companies at the same time was all kind of normal to me. And really, so the hard parts were, you know, how do you start a business? How do you take that leap? You know, the income side of it and a lot of those different things. So, you know, for me, but yeah, I think for other people, if you've never really consulted before, that can probably be a pretty, you know, scary thing and very different as opposed to being a practitioner who's charged with doing that inside of an organization. But I will say that with the way the industry is growing, there's plenty of room on the bandwagon, right? Like, I'm not here to compete with you. Like, there's tons of companies that are trying to figure out, what is this community thing? How are we going to do it? And they need people like us to come in and help fast track that to make sure that they're on the right track and they're doing the right thing. So yeah, it's been really interesting. But like I said, you know, exciting and terrifying at the same time.
That's life, right?
That's right.
Well, yes. I mean, like you touched on, community became bigger than ever in 2020, especially because people were confined. If we're talking about from kind of society's level, not just companies, you know, we were all confined to our homes. We were seeking connection virtually. How do you think community played a part in society's resilience?
Well, you know, so I think if we look at it at the macro level, right? Everybody's always craving
Oh, is it frozen for you guys also, or is it just me? You're back.
Okay.
Yeah? Keep going. Oh no, we got frozen again. Technology.
Hello. Blur?
Little pixelated on my screen.
Okay. Yeah.
Well, we can now. Yeah. Okay. I think we're okay to go. Yeah. Just pixelated.
Live events, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to virtual events. Let's talk about virtual events in 2020, right? So, yeah, I mean, look, everybody was in quarantine. Everybody was, you know, craving connection. And at the same time, companies are trying to figure out, what are we doing? You know, how are we going to connect with our customers and support them? Especially if you had retail locations or you had, you know, in-person events. And so it really kind of, in a way, forced this showcase of community and the value and what it could bring. Whether companies wanted to do it or not, they kind of got forced into it. And they got a little window, right, into, okay, like this is interesting. We're doing some different things. It's working out for us. And so, kind of going back to like that, being a part of something bigger than yourself, I think that really went into overdrive with the pandemic and wanting to connect. But I will say we've also, to be fair, right, we've also seen the other side, which is super ugly, of this whole thing of people wanting to be a part of something bigger than themselves and then, hopping on the radicalization bandwagon or something like that. And so this is where the old, Uncle Ben, Peter Parker, great power, great responsibility quote comes in, that as we're thinking about, okay, now we've been thrust into people understanding that community is important and they want more of it, and how are we going to build it, that we need to wield this responsibly and think about what we're building and how we're building it and how those things are going to be used. I think most of us are working at companies where that's not going to be an issue, but we may have a few people on the line that are thinking about how they build like next generation social networks or groups or things like that. And
Well, the audio got distorted again. Oh, man.
Well, anyway, I was just rambling, so you didn't miss anything. But, look, I was just saying that I think, we need to be very responsible in how we think about this. I think most people are, but clearly, there's two sides of this coin, right, in community and kind of how people use it as a tool to accomplish different things.
Yeah, definitely. This conversation has been going, especially if we talk about social platforms. What is their responsibility with everything? 2020 was a year where we could all stay connected with people around the world, but it was also a year where there was a lot of talk of how these social platforms maybe are helping to propel and promote certain types of communities that are causing a lot of problems in the world and in governments. But we won't go too deep into that. But that's a whole nother program we could do.
Yeah. Now, we can't deny that the pandemic is going on, and as much as we are probably sick of talking about it, it's still something that I feel like we should. So the next question is, what common challenges do you see popping up for community around the world due to the effects of the pandemic, in particular community managers?
Yeah, I think, as I mentioned before, we're all living through this and it's affecting all of us in different ways. And it's really hard to, I think, effectively manage your community when you're struggling yourself. And so I think that's been a big theme of the last year, is like, how do we square the circle in terms of making sure that community managers are in a good enough to be able to manage their community and help their members. There's a bunch of things we'll talk about a little bit later on that front, about like the management of teams and how we can help enable that, right? I think the influx of scale also caused a lot of pain in talking to companies and community managers because they were sort of thrust into community very quickly, or they had one and it all of a sudden became way more important than it was before. The expectations from the C-level and folks like that were pretty large, right? It was sort of, you went from, hey, this is just a siloed thing we do for support, to this is our entire communication plan for our customers, go, and I want to see performance like now, became a really hard balance for a lot of people to, kind of orchestrate the strategy that they had already built and were working on, while at the same time serving this new, kind of influx of scale, right? So I think that focus internally was a big change. And on one hand, it was a good thing because it, provided this boost to community as a value driver. But on the other hand, it's just more pressure to deal with. And that's kind of what I've heard from most people and most companies about it.
Yeah, well, from what I've seen, regardless of whether it's been difficult or easy, people have done such a good job in adapting so quickly to something that we didn't even envision, coming from day to day. It seemed to change every day. And I say for myself that how challenging it's been for myself, but how much I've learned from this experience as a community manager and going forward, and just not being more prepared, but just thinking outside the box of what could happen, because nothing had really happened before this. So yeah, no, I completely agree.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of people for the first time discovering crisis communication and how to manage a community through a crisis. And I think there's no playbook for that. There's no way to train for that other than to just live through it a couple of times. And because I've been doing this long enough, fortunately or unfortunately, I have lived through that a bunch of times of, kind of dealing with crises. But, hopefully what the result of that is that it now puts people in a better position to deal with it going forward. And like, let's start today, right? Let's start putting together what is our plan for the next trip around, a crisis, and what does that look like, and how are we going to deal with it so that we're not surprised by it. And when it comes up, we have some reasonable playbook that we can execute to make sure that we know how to deal with this in the best way possible.
No, definitely. Stephanie?
Yeah, definitely. We were, communities around the world were facing multiple crises or multiple conversations that were happening that maybe weren't directly related to their community's topic, right? So we had the pandemic, we had Black Lives Matter, we had in the US, the elections and everything that was happening politically. So that was new for a lot of people to be like, wow, I'm not sure how to navigate all of these conversations when my community is about travel or about baking and people want to talk about different things. So definitely, I think it was a year of learning for community managers on how to, create that playbook, think about that playbook, and think about how they want to navigate, I guess, just such a, a nuanced world or nuanced conversations that we're having in our communities, because these are things that matter to people beyond your topic at hand, right?
Exactly right.
All right, going back to what you're talking about, companies, looking to community or companies relying on community more than ever. For some companies, communities surface as that key driver of resilience that could keep their employees and customers engaged in this new all virtual world. Can you share any examples of companies who turn to community to help them navigate unprecedented change?
Yeah, I'll start with, not a company, but I'm glad you mentioned Black Lives Matter, because I think that if we look at 2020 and we say who was the most effective at creating community and orchestrating it across the world, there's no doubt that BLM was, in my mind, the most successful at doing that, right? From sort of a grassroots movement through now a global movement that everybody's paying attention to and attending their events, and they have changed the world, right? They have effectively used their power as a community to create lasting and real change. And I think that's a great example of someone that, a group of people that really cranked it up, right? And used community effectively. There's a bunch of, on the company side, of course, there's a bunch of companies that did this that we could name. I think, this kind of goes back to what we were discussing before about, I think the biggest piece was the shift from in-person to, virtual events. And we saw companies like Salesforce and Tableau and Alteryx and companies like that take what was once seen as the prime example of online events and user groups, hundreds a month or hundreds a day in some cases, and like with a flip of a switch, immediately shift those over to being all virtual, right, on events like this, hopefully with a better internet connection than I have today. And so, there was a bunch of that stuff going on. And to their credit, it was a massive undertaking and they pulled it off really well. I think in the future, we're going to see, kind of shifting back to the middle, but it was a really good example of like, how do you connect with your community despite the challenges that we're having? And I think events was a really big part of that. And there's just so many stories, I've talked to so many people about how they rethought their entire business model and, shifted it to community. So there's tons of great ones that I'm sure, the folks in the chat are some of the people executing on those strategies, which is fantastic.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so talking about burnout, I'd love to know if you have any advice for community managers who felt they felt burnt out from the last year and are struggling to find the momentum to push forward in 2021.
Yeah, so this is a really complicated question, in my opinion, and people might not like exactly what I have to say about this, but here we go. So I think, first of all, burnout doesn't just happen today, right? Burnout is a symptom of decisions, choices, and leadership that we made probably years ago, right? And how we've structured our teams, how we've thought about the boundaries that we put around our work, and what we're willing to do for our community. It's pretty clear that everybody in the community industry is super excited about their community and they have a sense of ownership over it, but that can be abused, right? And we often set ourselves up, we put ourselves in a position to kind of have those boundaries pushed and be abused to a perspective, right? And so what I think is the message I want to get out here to people is we need to think about that really deeply and figure out what is a scalable and sustainable model for people who manage communities and teams of people who manage communities to make sure that that doesn't happen, right? If someone's burning out or they're enduring mental health issues because of the hours you're putting in or the type of community you're in or something, then we've failed, right? We've completely failed from a leadership perspective and how we set up these boundaries to, like, nobody should be crying at their desk, okay? If you're crying at your desk and you're freaking out and that, like, this is a job, right? And I know that you care about your community and that's admirable, but we also need to understand the reality of the situation here, right? And make sure we're taking care of people. And a lot of that goes back to the leadership level. And what I see oftentimes from the leadership level is more of a treatment of the symptoms rather than the cause, right? So when someone starts to burn out, for example, in a lot of cases, it's like, oh, well, we'll give them a day off, or we'll give you a ticket for a massage or something. And it's like, well, you're just treating the symptoms, but you're not actually treating the underlying cause, which is the expectations are inappropriate. We don't have enough resources. We're expecting too much of this human being. I tweeted a big long thread about this during the holidays, right? Community managers are typically the people during the holidays that are going to stay online and, be on their laptop in the middle of Christmas or Hanukkah celebrations or whatever the case is. And that just shouldn't be the case, right? Like, people need time off. They need to go be a human with their families like everybody else. And so we really need to think about what are those mitigation strategies? How are we going to lead with empathy and set this up the right way? And just to cap off my rant here, if you find yourself in that situation, right, and you've discussed this with your leadership and nothing's changing, it's probably time for you to find a new job. And that's really tough for a lot of people to hear, right? Because again, we love our communities and, I'm not telling you to just quit your job, right? But what I am telling you is that if you are experiencing this in your career, in your life, and you've attempted to make strides to fix it, right? And talk to your leadership and try to, and it's just not happening. You can continue to sit around and hope that they're going to change their mind someday. But my experience is that that's probably not likely. If you've had that conversation, nothing has changed. And now with our new work from home culture, there are a lot of companies out there that are thinking about what is the future of work in terms of work from home and flexibility and empathy for your employees. And so the grass is not always greener, right? But I do think it's important that people understand that they have options and not to feel trapped in a position where it's just something untenable long term. So anyway, I said a lot, but that's how I feel about it. So.
No, I mean, that's a great answer. And I shared in the chat earlier that there are so many jobs on the CMX job board. So if you are looking to transition into a new role or start in the community industry, there are so many employers that are looking for people right now in all areas of the world, remote, part-time, full-time. So yeah, this is a great time to get into the industry or take on a new opportunity.
Yeah.
Love it. All right, we're getting here to the end. And Valentina let you guys know in the chat, but also going to remind you here, if you have any questions for Brian, please drop them in the Q&A box, which is at the top of the chat here, and we'll be taking them in just a few minutes. All right, so Brian, many communities experienced challenges in 2020. That's an understatement. And were forced to pivot their entire strategy. You had even mentioned that a little while ago. What are some actions community managers can take to help them stay agile and nimble to the challenges that 2021 may bring?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think we started talking about this a little bit before, but I often encourage community professionals, really anybody in any field in business, to think about the work that they do, the strategies they build, and the execution of that strategy. Think of it as pieces on a chessboard, or puzzle pieces, or whatever you want to call it. But just understand, like, again, change is inevitable, right? These things are going to keep happening. From a business perspective, if you go longer than 3 or 4 weeks without major changes in your business, whether that's a reorg or the company changing direction, then you're lucky, right? And so what's really important is to think about, what can I build that will be lasting, but also give me the flexibility to execute along the way and be able to make changes as they come. And this is a really hard balance, right? And so I think it's why people struggle with it, because it's hard to say, what's our big vision? Where do we want to be a few years from now? And then what are the 3 or 4 different paths that we think we could take to get to that same place, as opposed to, here's the one path that we can take. And if one roadblock gets in our way, then the whole thing's off and we can't execute and community dies and whatever else. Like, that just can't be the case, right? So making sure that you put in the work ahead of time to really know where to play offense and defense, and whatever the situation might be, how are you willing to sacrifice different pieces and parts and be able to move them around to have something that's going to be flexible enough, right? At the same time, now that I said all of that, it's also important to not, as Erica would say, over-rotate, right? A lot of people are very reactive, and they're just sort of running around from one problem to the next, trying to put out fires. And that's never a good thing. And so a lot of times, as everything's burning around you or changing or whatever the case is, you have to be able to have a vision and say, this is where we need to go, right? And here's the steps to get there. And you have to have some level of conviction in the strategy that you have and what you're going to do to get there. And like I said, sometimes you're going to have to stand on that ground, and sometimes you'll have to give a little bit. It's a really hard balance, and I don't really know how to, describe it better than that, other than to say, think deeply about how you can move this stuff around. And then lastly, I would just say, use your support system. Call a friend. Understand that you don't have to solve all these problems, and it's unlikely that one person has all of the answers to every question. And so as much as people say, oh, Brian, you've been in this industry forever, you've seen everything. Yeah, I've seen a lot, but you know what? Every day something comes up that I haven't seen or I need a refresher on. I call Donnie, I call Jake, I call Erica, I call David, I call tons of people, and I say, hey, what do you think about this? What should I do? What's the right path for this, right? And that way it's not all on you to figure out everything and have to hold that burden yourself. That's why we have these events and this whole network of people at CMX, right? So that we can leverage that to learn and succeed together. So anyway, I think that's the best advice I could give here.
Thank you so much. Any last words on resiliency for our audience? Anything you'd like to add?
No, nothing for me. I mean, I think I got it all out here. Happy to take any questions and, help people out wherever I can. Like I said, I would just end, I guess, by saying, I think resiliency is different for everybody. And I wouldn't get into the comparison game of thinking, oh, well, that person is doing, this or that or the other thing. I do think it's something you kind of have to find for yourself, and what those thresholds are and what your abilities are, and just recognize, when you need some time off, and make sure that you're taking the time to do that, because being a martyr doesn't help anybody, right? I think a lot of times we kind of like doing that because it feels like we're being a hero, or that I was the only person who stayed around during New Year's Eve, or stuff like that. But it's actually really important that people take time and recharge the batteries, or else you're just gonna have a hard time staying up, especially as these, crises and whatever keep popping up. So.
Exactly. I think 2020 was the year collectively, as humans, we realized how resilient we all are, or how much more resilient we are. I mean, collectively, we all went through, we're still going through something together, and we made it, and we're pushing forward. And I think it's a year where, it's a year where hopefully we were able to rely on people more, be more vulnerable, talk about things, talk about the hard times, because it was a year that was difficult for everybody. And yes, Brian, thank you so much. We are not ending this here because we're going to hop to the Q&A. So if you guys, just a reminder, if you have any questions, drop them in the Q&A. We'll be taking those in just a few seconds, but just going to give you a little round of applause right now for this fireside chat. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks for having me.
And yeah, this is great. We got quite a few questions here. So I don't know, Valentina, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, I'll go first. So the first question is from Amar. He says, or I shouldn't say, how do you best manage the increase in volume and importance of community management?
Yeah. Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because we've spent a couple of decades talking about how community needs more importance and more understanding, especially at the executive level. And be careful what you wish for, I guess, right? So here we are. I think the way you handle it, and I've been talking about this a lot for a long time, is, you know, to kind of meet in the middle. One of the best things you can do as a community professional is to understand the business side, right, of what businesses want and need, and what are the motivations of the people in management or executive level, and what are they looking for. And I think if you understand that, then you can answer this question for yourself and say, okay, their goals look like this, and here's what we're trying to do with community. How can we bring those things together? And then tell that story, right, in a compelling way to help your executives understand what is the value of this and what can it do and what can't it do for that matter, and then be able to, you know, go forward there. So that's just kind of my general, you know, thing, is that like everybody should always be kind of increasing their business acumen so that when these types of things happen, you know how to talk to that specific audience and deliver some value there.
Great answer. Okay, Stephanie.
Okay. Okay, next question. From Melody.
Hey, Melody.
Thanks. Her question: any advice for community leaders trying to help their super users feel connected during the pandemic? She says it feels like they can be quite reliant on our resilience right now as they're online more and rely on the super user program for an escape. And I can't see the rest of the question, but there.
Yeah. You know what's interesting about this question in my mind is that it's actually representative of not just during the pandemic time, but really always, right? I see a lot of people building super user advocate, you know, whatever MVP, whatever term you want to use to describe those types of groups of people. And they're often built kind of with a short-term mindset, right? Of like, how are we going to reward these people in the short term? And then 6 months later, we've sort of blown through all of our swag and it's like, oops, what do we do now? Right. And so I think, you know, whether it's a pandemic or just in general, the best advice I can give is to really build a program around these people that has a very lasting strategy where you've very thoughtfully rolled out, you know, what are we doing today, tomorrow, next week, next quarter, next year, 2 years down the line? How are we giving ourselves space to build this out and not have it stagnate or have people feel like they're being disconnected? I would say that super users, probably more than any other group of people, have an opportunity to connect with you very directly, I would hope, as opposed to your overall member base, right? So I think they're in a good position. And if some of them are asking you this, I would actually turn it back on them and say, you know, how can super users help the community, right, feel more connected? And maybe through those activities and their participation in that, they then feel connected back again, right? So I think there's different ways to kind of frame that question and think about it.
Like the answer. Next question.
Next question is from Amar again. It says that the pandemic has massively scaled the online engagement and community manager piece in the marketing mix. Your thoughts?
Yeah, Erica and I were talking about this the other day, that marketing has become a major driver of community at companies, right? So it used to be primarily support or customer success. Those types of groups would classically own community and operate it, and you may get some value outside of those groups. We've clearly seen in the last, I would say, year or so, the precipitous rise of marketing and people in marketing understanding the value of community and really being the champions and trying to bring it into the organization. What I would say about this is that in the past, marketing and community have kind of butted heads, right? It's kind of been like, oh, they don't know what they're doing over there in marketing. They don't understand community, and community people are like, marketing doesn't get it, and blah, 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 blah. I'm seeing those dividing lines start to fade away, and there's a lot more understanding now from the marketing side of things that, you can use this for really positive aspects of marketing, but they also understand the value across the rest of the organization. And so in that regard, I think we've turned a corner, and we should definitely all be embracing our friends in marketing now. And I'll just tell you, most of the clients that I'm working with right now are from the marketing side of these organizations. So if you're thinking about your career, right, and where you want to go and what your next step might be, I would suggest, if you're not already in a marketing environment, taking the time to understand, again, back to what I was saying before about motivations, understand what marketers care about and how they think about the world, and start to see where you can meet in the middle from a community perspective. Because I bet the next time you go to interview somewhere, you might have to interview with someone in marketing, and it would be great if you're prepared to speak to that particular, kind of mixing of those two things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I love the way that out of all of this, it's really brought out so many silver linings to how we work and the different people that we work with, and those relationships that we can deepen with people that we may have not really considered a priority before, and now it seems to be moving in that direction.
Yeah, and I think just to add one more thing there, we can't afford to ignore a whole department full of people anymore, right? We can't say we don't like them, we're not going to work with them anymore. That's not the ball game. Like, we used to do that, and that's why we were in the silos we were in, and that's why we had a hard time breaking out of the silos we were in. And so my encouragement to everybody is think about the whole pie, right? Like, who do I need to work with in support? Who do I need to work with in marketing? Who's my liaison over in product? Who am I talking to in customer success? And really build a comprehensive strategy across the entire business and make sure you're delivering value across the business, because that's ultimately how you're going to be successful. And that's how we're going to deliver on this dream that we've all had for, a couple of decades now, about community being truly embedded in the business and being a pillar of the business that's respected and invested in. You can't do that if you blacklist a whole functional unit of the company or something, right? It's just not realistic anymore.
Completely agree. All right, Seppi, I think we have one more question. Again, if you have any more questions, let us know. Brian's here, so he is Brian is your oyster. It's
terrifying.
All right, next question, maybe the last question if there are no more. Lincoln says, as an industry consultant, do you see companies making community a bigger priority, or has it stayed relatively the same or become less of a priority?
Yeah, thanks, Lincoln. So a couple of things on this. So number one, yes, it is becoming a bigger priority as forced by COVID and other things. And also, I think for the first time, we have executives that have lived through community at another company, right? So a lot of the things that I hear from leadership at companies is they say, oh yeah, like I start talking to them like, hey, tell me what your view is on community. And I'm expecting them to kind of say, well, we're not really sure. That's why we hired you, et cetera, et cetera. And instead what I get is they say, oh yeah, we've had community at the last two companies I worked at. I was a champion of one of them. So they've seen it now, right? And they understand it better. And so that's helping us get into those higher levels, and just generally people in the company having more of a frame of reference, where it used to be we'd go into a company and start talking about community and everybody's eyes would glaze over and they'd be like, we don't know what the hell you're talking about. Now people are just more familiar with it, which makes life easier. On the investment side, they're hiring people like me as a consultant. They're spending lots of money on platforms. There are more community jobs than I've ever seen. There's probably been more community jobs in the last 6 months than I saw in the last 2 decades, right? So you talked about the CMX job board. There's other ones out there. Tons of jobs from all levels, beginner to VP. I mean, so yes, they're very much investing more, but I would say that a lot of them are still very early on in their thinking, right? So it's like they know that they need community, they've heard about it, they've seen it, they want to do it, but they're trying to understand for their organization what is the specific set of, like, what does community look like for us? And so in that vein, there's a lot of discovery and strategy that goes on before they're ever going to think about, you know, vendors and hiring people and those things. They really want to get a sense of, if we invest in this and we spend a couple $100,000 or $1 million or whatever it is based on the company, they want to know that they know what they're doing, right? And so, yes, the investment and the priority is there, but they're still feeling through what's the value going to be and can we build a compelling strategy for us?
Fabulous. Thank you so much. All right, going
Actually,
once, going
in
twice.
the general chat.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Liz, right?
So Liz is asking, within marketing, where do you see the divisional overlap between content marketing and community, and the differences between community events and marketing webinars?
Yeah, I think the answer to your first question probably answers the second one. And so what I mean by that is, if we think about content on a high level, it's like, what is the goal of content, right? At its most basic form. And I bet if you ask someone in marketing that question and you ask someone in community that question, you might get two different answers. You might get two answers that overlap a little bit, or you might get the same answer. I think it depends who's there. But to me, the difference is content marketing from a marketing perspective generally means we are pushing out our message to people, right? And we're trying to get them to come around to our point of view. I think most people think of community content more in the vein of, how can we enable people to be successful, right? Instead of so much of the how, it's more of the why, right? Why would I be interested in a product or a service like this? And so I think there's some interesting like dividing lines there, but I do think with the integration of marketing and community, you're starting to see those lines blur a little bit more than they had in the past. And so when you think about events, the same thing is true. It really comes down to what kind of content or who's speaking at your events and what are they talking about? And I think that probably gives you a good view about, you know, is this a marketing event, or is this a, you know, community driven event, or is there some middle ground? I think the main thing from like, if we just back up for a second, think about the customer perspective or the people consuming this content, whether it's an event or, you know, content marketing, it's, do I feel like this is for me? And do I feel like this is coming from a authentic place? And I think that's why you see events becoming such a huge space, because like this, I don't have an agenda. I'm not here to sell you something or, you know, like put up a promo code or whatever. I'm just here to tell you, you know, what I've seen and what's been successful so that you too can go be successful. And I think that kind of authenticity for people is really what they want, right? As opposed to the, hey, we're going to go to like, what was the old thing in sales for like 20 years? Like, we're going to go to Morton's Steakhouse and we're going to, you know, buy you a steak and a whiskey, and then you're going to hear a presentation about our ERP system. I think those days are gone. I don't think many people want to go to those types of events anymore, right? It's not impactful, and they don't get the value out of it as you do like a community-led authenticity, you know, type of play.
Got it. And we have another question here from Piper has a question. She says, with regard to the jobs that are posted by companies who have not spent much time with community, do you think that they're expecting too much from that one person's role, that one community role?
Yeah, and I can see Lincoln, big fan of the Morton Steakhouse things. Lincoln knows what I'm talking about. So yeah, look, I think companies don't know what they want, right? So a lot of times when you look at a lot of these postings for community roles, unless they have someone that's there or a consultant or something that's helping them draft these job descriptions and saying, here's what the actual role should look like, you know, for the level and the compensation that you're trying to put together and your goals. A lot of times they're just going around the web and copy and pasting other stuff that they've seen, you know, from other job postings for community roles, because that's the only frame of context they have. And what happens over time is it becomes a game of telephone, where if I create a job description today and it has 10 bullets and 3 of them are bullshit, and then someone comes and copies that a day later, now they have those, and then someone copies them and they added a couple of like BS ones in there. You can see how quickly that can get out of hand, right? And so what's actually really important is that people like us that have been in this for a long time, help them understand, here's what an actual job description and reasonable expectations for the compensation that you're willing to pay looks like. And I will say, going back to the earlier question about the investment, almost every company that I'm working with right now has requested this as part of the engagement, that I help them write job descriptions, post it on their site, and then recruit. So in that way, I am kind of actively being a part of that solution, but it can't just be me, right? We all gotta kind of do this together. And I think, over time, if we do that really well, then we'll kind of normalize out what these roles and expectations and compensation is. And hopefully that's better for everybody. That's my hope.
Fabulous. All right. I think that is all the questions. Thank you guys for all of your wonderful questions. Let's give another wonderful round of applause to Brian. Thank you so much for all of your insights, Brian, and for your time tonight. I really learned a lot and hope our audience did too. Let us know in the chat, y'all, if you learned something. What's your favorite takeaway?
If you didn't learn anything, just tweet insults at me. Just go that route. But thank you for having me, everybody. I really appreciate it. Hopefully we can, kind of continue this on Twitter and LinkedIn and wherever else you like to hang out. We'd love to, kind of chat further with people.
Yeah, I was just about to say, where can everyone get in touch with you? LinkedIn, Twitter, anywhere else that you're around?
Cup and String, MySpace. Yeah, I'm pretty much Brian Oblinger everywhere. So I'm Brian Oblinger on Twitter, LinkedIn, obviously. We have the podcast In Before the Lock, which I think the link is in the description of this event, so you can go find us there. Come find us and love to talk to you about it.
Perfect. Well, thank you once again, Brian. So much great information that's been shared. We are recording this, so if anyone wants to rewatch it because of so much information we've shared, we'll pop it out very shortly. We've just got a few little announcements before we head on out this evening. As always, we like to tell you about what's happening next. And our next event is going to be on February 10th. We have yet to decide a topic. So if you have a topic in mind that you would like us to cover, pop it in the chat now so that me and Seppi can figure out how we can bring you more value to these CMX Connect events, because we want to know what you want to know about. So let us know. That's going to be on February 10th. In the meantime, though, if you want to be more social with us and with CMX in general, there's so many ways you can do it. First of all, if you're not part of the CMX Hub group on Facebook, if you're a Facebook user, there's over 10,000 community professionals in there with daily posts, people looking for different advice and sharing information with each other. You can also, if you're on Slack, there's the Community Managers CMX Slack channel. Again, lots of activity going on in there as well. We also have a group, CMX Connect Madrid. If you want to join us, you don't have to be based in Madrid to join us. And also, if you love listening to podcasts, there are a number of podcasts. There's the C2C podcast by Bevy, which Beth McIntyre hosts. And then there's also the Masters of Community with David Spinks, which has so many great people on the show talking about all different types of community topics. So lots of ways to get involved. Be sure to connect with myself and Seppi on all the socials. We share lots of different community resources as well, because that's what it's all about. It's about helping each other grow and thrive as community professionals. So we hope we can help you. One last thing before you go. Once you leave this event, you'll shortly receive a feedback form. If you would take just a few minutes to fill that out for us, we'd be really grateful. And other than that, I don't think we have much more to say this evening. Seppi?
No, I'm just going to drop some of the links that you mentioned there. I just want to thank everyone again for joining us for our first CMX event of the year 2021. We're all here in the future. Oh yeah, look, those links didn't post well either. Okay, well, you have them there. But thank you so much. We're excited to see you guys in February. Again, if, like Valentina said, if you think of any topics, let us know. If you're an expert and you would like to talk, let us know. Reach out to us. We're happy to chat with you all. But thank you guys for joining us today.
Yes, thank you. Have a wonderful Wednesday, and Hopefully we will see you at the CMX Community Industry Awards on January 25th. And don't forget, on that day, that is the day for us. So if you're on the social channels, make sure you hashtag CMAD. I think CMAD or CMAD 2021. There's going to be so many people on there. It's really great. Last year, it just blew up Twitter. It was just so great to see everyone coming out and celebrating virtually. And hopefully we'll do the same this year. That's it. Be resilient, people. And if you ever need to reach out to anybody, we are open. Our doors are always open. Just send us a message and we'll be there to help you wherever we can. Thank you, everybody.
All right.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Ciao.